Good evening and welcome to Resolutions for Recovery. We had a lot of comments last week regarding the show that we did with the young people and harm reduction in the Northport, East Northport school district. The kids don't like to so much call it prevention because they want to talk to their peers in a way that engages them to, if they have started down a path that may not quite look like abstinence, but will certainly be a reduction in harm to the individual. So we're going to continue the conversation tonight regarding substance use disorder and how to prevent it. So my special guest is my best friend, who Facebook just said that again today.
Oh, awesome.
Miss Kym Laube from Hugs. Mm-hmm. And you are the, when I think of prevention, that's it. You're the poster child. But tonight we're going to call it Kym Laube Unleashed.
I don't know that we really want to go there, but we could talk about some of those ideas.
Because it is frustrating, I know, to try to work on stopping an epidemic. And we always, it really doesn't matter what the drug is, and people in communities really need to focus on that. Mm-hmm. The drug is unimportant. It's substance use disorder, period. Mm-hmm. So alcohol's still killing more people than any drug epidemic going on right now. So we really need to focus on where it starts. Mm-hmm. People don't like to think of alcohol as a drug, now do they?
Nope.
But so let's talk about communities and really making an impact in a community, because with Northport, East Northport, with their drug and alcohol task force and what they do in the school, they really have taken a community by siege and are, I think, really starting to see a shift.
Yeah. And we know the science that if you have planned comprehensive strategies in communities over time, you will see a reduction in use. Northport East Northport is a drug-free communities funded coalition, which is awesome. When you can get a coalition going that moves from that grassroots coalition to what we call a professional coalition, you're going to start to see some real significant changes and shifts in behavior. But let me just kind of go back just a tiny bit in this conversation, because as schools are finding themselves dealing with increased incidences of drugs on campus, alcohol on campus, you're seeing schools, the vaping's
huge.
The vaping is, and every school district is dealing with it. And if they're not dealing with it yet, I give you less than 18 months before it's going to be on your campus. So as schools look to say, oh my gosh, we have this crisis going on, oftentimes what happens is they'll throw a bunch of stuff to the wall and see what sticks. Now, I always kind of chuckle because I know well-meaning folks are at schools looking at what they could do, right? So some of the first things they'll always say is bring in the drug-sniffing dogs. That'll stop kids. If fear and education were the only two things that stopped adolescents from using drugs and alcohol, we wouldn't really have a problem. Kids know drugs are bad.
Yes.
They know they're bad, and to a point have a fear of them. But we didn't wind up here because we didn't educate them.
Correct.
They're educated.
Absolutely. They're educated a little too well.
Too well, right?
Yeah.
So first and foremost, you're going to see schools say things like bring in the drug sniffing dogs. I've really yet to find a school that's had great success with doing that, or a whole body of research that supports that being effective. Then the next thing they'll historically do is they'll put a car out on a corner that was in a crash that says don't drink and drive. Kids are phenomenally educated on don't drink and drive. As a matter of fact, parents are educated on don't drink and drive. And one of the things we like to push people to now is just moving that conversation to let's just work on kids not drinking. Because part of what has fed the house parties is this idea that if I'm letting them drink in my house, I'm keeping them safe. Well, you're keeping them safe from being in a vehicle and potentially having a car crash, but you're not keeping their brains chemically safe from future health problems.
Yes.
And so going back to what Anthony's doing in Northport, East Northport, what they're doing with Riverhead Cap, what they're doing out in Sag Harbor, Safe in Sag Harbor, Lindy Cares. And I know there are many other funded community coalitions across Long Island that are all supported by the Office of National Drug Control Policy. In order to get that funding, there are things you have to do. And the things you have to do are part of the process of the scientific process. First and foremost.
And are there benchmarks then that they have to reach?
There's absolutely, right. So one of the first things you have to do is, so any community right now that is dealing with this, one of the first things when you call me and you say, we have a drug problem in my school, I'm going to tell you, form a community coalition.
Yes.
Because the truth is, school systems alone cannot solve this. They can't fix it on their own. They can.
Nor should they.
Nor should they, right?
Right.
And that's the part of, we've kind of looked to the schools and put the responsibility of parenting our children on them.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it's us as parents and it's our community.
It's really ironic that we've put the onus on the school to parent our children.
Yeah.
However, when the school calls and says, little Johnny or little Mary did this, the parent is the first one to say, no, they didn't. Yeah. Do you have video of them putting the marijuana in their locker? No, they didn't. So they're the first ones to defend their children, but yet they want the school to do all the hard work.
You know, there's so many different things that come into play, and helicopter parenting is certainly something that we cannot dismiss. Unmet mental health needs are something we can no longer dismiss. The amount of anxiety our young people have today is far beyond anything we could have ever have imagined.
And bullying leads to other, if you're being bullied on a continuous basis every single day, you're going to look for some relief from that.
It's simply put, kids are doing it because it's available, it's there, they don't think it's going to hurt them.
Yes.
And
it's nice to escape.
They live in a society that says it's all okay. Take a pill to feel better about this.
Yes.
Have a couple drinks on a Friday night to feel better. So when a school begins to take a look at this, oftentimes what people think is going to be a good strategy really probably oftentimes, unfortunately, has no science behind it. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I'm 28 years sober. I could easily just make that my story. I'm just going to go into schools and tell my recovery story. But telling a recovery story on a Wednesday afternoon does not change adolescent behavior on a Friday or Saturday night.
Correct.
And so a car in front of a school crashed will not stop kids from drinking and drugging on a Friday or Saturday night.
A death in a school is not going to stop.
Enough. Yeah. So what do we have to do? And again, I go back to the support of the coalitions because for a variety of reasons, when you begin to pull together all the key stakeholders, not just the school, not just parents, but all 12 different sectors of the community, and begin to have meaningful conversation, and then begin to evaluate and assess and then design an action plan based on your assessment, now you're really starting to get some traction. So
the 12 sectors though, so we have school, we have churches, we have parents,
good,
local businesses, and police.
Yep, you're good.
And I got 5.
You got 5. You got 5. You could win a prize for that, right? So you want to bring together your business owners, your law enforcement, your school, your parents, your community, your faith-based. Kids must be at a table.
Yes.
We can't do anything for kids without kids there.
Yes.
You want to bring your healthcare folks together, your civic folks together. You want to bring together people who do work like myself, who do drug and alcohol prevention and or treatment, other youth-serving organizations, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, your local athletic league, whatever it is. So you want to bring all those folks together. And the strategy behind it is what you want to first start to do is, one, you're going to start with assessment. Now here's where assessment is really important. When you begin to study kids, then you begin to have clear, accurate data of what it is you're looking at. because what'll happen is your 8th grader will come home and say, well, everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it in 8th grade.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at the science and the data, we know that only 22% of our 8th graders are actively using, have tried alcohol within the last 30 days. So then you want to take a look and say, oh, where are those, if 22%, where are those other 78%? And let's start to put focus on them, because you don't want that 78% to now become some of the ones that are early experimenting. So using good, clear, accurate data to drive your process is so important.
How would a community get that data to survey the kids?
So here's absolutely. So
are they 100% honest?
Oh, let me tell you let me tell you a couple of different things about the survey tools. First and foremost, New York State Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse Services, OASIS, has done a phenomenal job in helping schools and communities do surveys. So they, a couple of years ago, started surveying, they launched a survey where they chose a whole bunch of large schools, a whole bunch of middle schools, and a whole bunch of small schools. So they had control groups and they could measure, and it was a statewide survey that went, and so folks in Syracuse were involved in it. We were certainly involved. I know some out east school districts were, and some up west, and so it began to give us the first look at what our actual numbers are. Now here's what people always say, well, you know, kids lie. Let me tell you about a couple of different things. There are things built into the survey that if a kid clicks yes on it and it really was not a drug, that whole survey is dismissed.
Really?
The second part is if somebody just clicks and said yes, 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 to I did everything, we don't even look at that survey either, because we know chances are nobody's doing all of the things that are listed on it. So we really have to trust the evaluators and the scientists who are designing
so they've
the
built
survey.
in for errors already.
They built in for errors. Now here's the other thing. When you look at the trends of how kids are using, they always follow the same data line. So that would mean if kids were lying, they would have to 100% let all their other friends know, answer this on this question and say this on that question, because there's no way that line would still kind of match up to the national norms.
Interesting.
So people like to dismiss the data. I'm going to tell you the data is accurate and it's good. And we're not only going to look at just that survey tool. A good coalition, a good group of those 12 stakeholders are going to come together, and they're going to look at that as one source. But then they're going to start to have some focus groups with different groups, different individuals, right? Where are kids hanging out and partying? Where are they accessing it? And you're going to get that through spending a lot of time with individuals in the community talking about what's happening, talking about what's going on. I love using this example. And this is where I had one of my 1,000 aha moments in this practice. We work with a group of kids, and I always kind of think I got my finger on the pulse. I know what kids are doing. I know where they're using. And so we had kids do an activity called community mapping, which is where they drew pictures of their community. They identified the...
What were the ages?
These were high school kids.
Okay.
So they began to draw what was important to them as they defined community. Oftentimes, adults will define community as Main Street. Kids will define community as the school building. In this particular picture, what they did was they drew the school. They actually drew the safety patrol, one of the guards at the school who they loved. They started to talk about sports were important. That particular school, what was really important to them was their computers. They had one-on-one computer learning. So they had a lot of great things. And then they drew kids on the beach. And next to the kids, they drew a little bag that had had the symbol of a local pharmacy on it. So I was like, oh, they're so thinking about the environment, because, you know, out east we really push for no plastic bags, right? So they're being so thoughtful of the environment. When I listened to the kids, I said, well, you know, you put the bag down because of the environment. They said, oh, no. That pharmacy, that's the #1 place we purchase alcohol. It's the #1 place that they would go, and they would buy their Natural Bush beer or buy whatever it was that was on sale right in the local community. So your wellness center, the place that you're supposed to get the stuff for health, was actually one of the #1 points. Now what we were able to do with that information, because it came right from the youth,
kids,
was work with our other sector, law enforcement, and say, hey, there's a great opportunity to train your staff who are checking people out. And so So what we always want to make sure we're doing is when we bring all the sectors together, using their areas of expertise. So that was a great learning, and that's why I always am like, have kids at the table and don't do anything for them without them, and because you'll learn so much.
Well,
so,
you know, sitting with them last week, and they were some incredible young
they're
people.
Great kids and great leadership over there.
And they said, you know, how can a teacher tell me what my friends and I want or need, because you have no clue. Because we think with an adult brain. We no longer think with although we can certainly act that way, we still can't think in the same way that, and their thinking is so much different.
Oh yeah.
It's just so much different.
The way that
it's amazing.
Yeah. They process information so fast nowadays. You know, they can have an earbud in, listening to, like, you know, rap music, great music, playing it as they're writing on the homework, you know, doing their homework on the computer while somebody's text messaging them, and they can do all that. They just process and do stuff at a rate of speed that we haven't mastered, because we didn't grow up with that.
We didn't grow up with
the
that.
frames per second on video, the frames per second on you know, cartoons, and everything they're watching happens at such a greater speed.
I still enjoy Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and that is pretty primitive.
we have a lot of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer quotes in the Laube household. We use them regularly. So the idea behind doing these focus groups is having kids talking about what's going on, or having parents talking about what's going on. But so now you have the qualitative data, right? The quantitative data. Now you've got to put the qualitative data where you begin to talk to do key focus groups, sit with key stakeholders, look at that anecdotal type information that we can add into the scene to really begin to paint a picture. So now
So it's not going to happen in a week.
It's not. So now here's the hard part, and you know, because we're in crisis, we look to do these quick knee-jerk things, and oftentimes people don't want to hear about doing a community coalition because it takes such a long time. As a matter of fact, you know, and the federal government gives you 5 years of funding for a reason. Because you're not going to start to really see results till 5 to 10 years out. You can hit your long-term, your short-term objectives and make some changes on the immediate, but it really does take a really long time.
It does.
We are so fortunate here on Long Island in that we have the Long Island Prevention Resource Center. We have them across the state, but I will say
Pamela Mizzi,
right? So I will say Suffolk County was really awesome in the forefront of this, because we actually created a prevention resource center before the state put theirs out, and so we really led the move and led the march on that. And what Pam's job in the PRC is to do is to really come to communities and sit and hold hands with you and help walk you through this very strategic process. We didn't design any of this. Pam didn't design it. Anthony didn't design it over in Northport. We're following a very tried system here that was based on the research of Dr. Hawkins and Catalano. You know, looked at the protective factors. We used the public health model. And what we find is doing this process, whether it's out east in the Hamptons, or if it's in Northport, or if it's in the Bronx, you can actually bring about cultural shifts and begin to change cultural norms by using steady, significant strategies that are designed, where you use the 7 strategies of community change. They're designed specifically for the community you're dealing with. What the why of why kids are drinking and drugging in Northport may be different than why kids are drinking and drugging in the Hamptons. I mean, I can speak very clearly to the data in the Hamptons. We know that kids drink and drug out there higher than they do the county level, the state level, and the national level. And there are a variety of reasons why we know kids in our area drink and drug more. First of all, it's the industry. Kids are working in the, you know,
at 16, they're
bar backs. They're bar backs. You know, people ask me all the time, wait a second, my kid can serve alcohol at 18 and not 21. And the truth is, yeah, your kid can serve alcohol at 18.
And at 16, they can, you know, clear tables.
Absolutely.
And drink other people's drinks. And it's happening.
Yeah. And so the culture out there, right? So we know we have kids working in that environment. You have the whole come party in the Hamptons culture that's going on.
It is the party From May
It
till
is-
October.
It is the party from May till, except for those of us who work there year round.
Yeah.
But for those who get to come and party here, that is their culture, right? We also know that per capita, the amount of places that can sell alcohol are generally higher out there than they are in other areas. Great example, West Hampton Beach Village, my village, 2.9 square miles. We have less than 3 square miles. We have 3 liquor stores in that, and we also have over 42 liquor licenses in 2.9 square miles. And people will be like, well, wait a second, if I go through and I count, and we don't realize how much alcohol is really there. Used to be that gas stations just sold gas.
Yeah.
Now gas stations are mini marts.
Yep.
And all of that is set up strategically to be at eye level, the grab and go bottles
Yes.
on your way out in the summertime. So all those kinds of pieces to this really begin
It
when you...
encourages.
Yeah.
You know, you
It
can't
normalizes
go to the,
it.
It does. And you can't go to the beach without a cooler.
Yeah.
7-Eleven sells those $5 styrofoam coolers.
Yeah.
Fill it up, ice, beer,
Makes
and
it
you're
easy.
good to go.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think I think one of the things that I've noticed as I started in this field, I joke all the time, I started in this field when I was 16. I started with the very same program I run today. And I love sharing that story because I was certainly, my mom put me on a PINS petition. She brought me in front of the judge. She said I was a person in need of supervision. I know we always joke and say I am still a person in need of supervision, right?
And I'm your supervisor.
And you're,
and that,
man.
and we're in trouble then.
We're in big trouble. It's a good thing we know the new DA, right? So I love sharing my story because it was really about things that went well in a community.
Yes.
I was a kid who was certainly not the kid you wanted your kid hanging out with. I was a kid getting in trouble. We grew up on welfare. We were in the Hamptons on welfare, which will definitely make you feel marginalized and
Yes.
make you feel like you were on the outskirts. I remember early on just finding, whether it was, stealing cigarettes from my mom or drinking, all those things made me kind of feel somewhat okay in the world.
Yes.
So my mom very brilliantly put me on PINS petition, and I had to do a whole bunch of community service. And I got to do it in the school, in the office, and one day a community member came in, right? And when the community member came in, her name was Mrs. Block. She asked me to hang up 100 posters for this program called Hugs. When I give workshops to high schools and middle schools, I certainly did not look like this. I probably had jeans that had all sorts of holes in them, not because I thought that they were cool and trendy, but they were hand-me-downs of hand-me-downs. Probably was rocking a Metallica t-shirt because I liked and still do Metallica. But I probably had a chain that went to a wallet that had absolutely no money in it. But I felt the need to chain it anyway. And what I wanted to do was have people be afraid of me because
Yes.
I was so incredibly afraid of everybody else, right? And so...
And that, that's like a bully.
Right? And that certainly was.
Yeah.
Now, the thing was, I was such a wounded child walking
Yes.
around. I had been significantly abused at my house, and everything
had a
you
wall
saw,
up.
everything you saw in school was simply my defense mechanisms.
Yeah.
And I kept those defense mechanisms around me all the time. And when I drank was the one time I didn't have to think about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't have to feel, right?
Yeah.
And I often think about today's kid is that, simply put, when they start drinking a little bit on a Friday or Saturday night, it's the one time in their week they're happy.
Yeah.
Nobody's on their case. Nobody's talking to them about something. Nobody's asking them to do anything.
Yeah.
All they get to just be is in that moment without a thought, without a feeling,
Yes.
and what they perceive as being happy. So finishing the story of what happened with me, Mrs. Block asked me to hang up these posters called Hugs, and I wanted to go. Everything inside of me wanted to go. I thought the things that it was saying on the paper actually resonated inside of me, and I had that little voice saying, you should do it, you should do it, until I got in front of Mrs. Block, and once she saw me, she was like, you know what, you should go, Kym. And once an adult thought it was a good idea, I thought it had to be the
Yes,
worst. I was
of
like,
course.
no way, not for me. But one of the pivotal moments, and I share this often because she didn't know me. She knew me as a kid in the community, She didn't know me, but she looked me dead in the eye and she said, you're going to make a difference. And I had to take pause because whether an adult had ever told me I was going to make a difference in this world, they might have. I never heard them before.
Yeah.
And I heard that woman that night. She begged me to become better, and she begged me to do whatever it is I needed to do to make that paradigm shift in my life and just go put my life on fire.
She believed in you.
She believed in me and saw me bigger than I could ever see myself.
Yes. And that's all you need sometimes.
Right. And I almost feel like we've got this craving going on with
Yes.
young people for that. You know,
We do. You know, mom and dad, listen, on Long Island, we know how difficult it is to earn a living, maintain a household, and keep up with the Joneses.
right. And we've made SAT scores and ACT scores. I mean, you know, Facebook and social media, and I'm a big Facebook gal. You'll find me, you'll know it, right? But what I do know is we've made it such parent bragging books
Yeah.
that it really, we're missing working with kids about their awesomeness is not about what they got on their SAT. Their awesomeness is not about what college they got into or what touchdown they scored. Their awesomeness is about who they are inside
Yes.
that worked on all those disciplines to get them there.
Yes.
I had a great conversation today. I stopped off at our local, one of our local stores. Ran into a community member. His name is Matt. We'll give him a big shout out, right? Hi, Matt. And we started to have a conversation about young people. One of the things we clearly talked about with our young people is that because their identity becomes about their scores
Yes.
and what they're doing on the playing field, we're missing the opportunity to have kids have the identity about who they are,
Yes.
right? And so if you take my cousin right now, is breaking records all over Suffolk
Dylan
County.
Laube.
Dylan Laube, not my kid, he's my cousin, right? People, it's the number one question people ask me. I shot him a text message like 2 Tuesdays ago, and I said, today is not game day, and you are just as awesome right now in this moment as you are when you are rushing and breaking records on that. Because the truth is if you take that sport away,
Yes.
he is still an amazing, awesome human being. And we need to sing that a little bit more to kids. That it's
do.
not about what they're producing, it's about who they are. And who they are is what is going to bring them to greatness in all areas of their life.
It takes this, you know, another 9 months out of the year that Dylan Laube works on running, building strength and building muscle. Andrew, my youngest son, was a wrestler. And I will never, because I hope that I changed some parents that day.
Yeah.
Andrew came out and everyone said what a great job he did at his match because he won. And he looked at me and he goes, I know. And people said, what does that mean? And Andrew said, I wrestled horribly today. I got lucky. And he walked away. And they said, a win's a win. I said, no. If he gives 110% any day of the week,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if he wins or loses. Because he gave 110%, and you're not always going to win.
Yeah.
And that was always our rule. You didn't talk to Andrew if he lost for quite a few days.
Yeah.
But then the question would be, what would you change if you could? And he would either know the mistake that he made in his match, or he'd say, I wouldn't change anything. He was better than me for that match. Done. And he went to correct, what could I do, what can I work on to prepare me for the next match?
It's interesting.
To prepare him for life.
Yep. And that's right. So that's the piece
the
right
key.
there. When we talk about, you know, what do I do at the end? Because 12-step fellowship has taught me at the end of my night, I have to, you know, sit down and take a look at my day. And part of what I really want to encourage with the young people I work with through our program out on Shelter Island, the training campus, one of the things we work with is saying, take a look at how you showed up that day. How did you show up that day? And were you honest with yourself? Were you honest with your peers? Were you, you know, did you help out, and were you in service and contribution to somebody else? Did you have a moment where, you know, you kind of fell short a little bit? You know, maybe you kind of saw that bottle on the ground and you said, not mine, I'm not going to pick it up. Whatever it is, how do we take that honest evaluation of self and then make those adjustments? But how do we keep it right sized? And here's what happens when I'm in schools and I'm talking with kids. There are a couple of questions I ask every group, whether it's 7th graders through 12th graders, whether we're in a health class or we're in an assembly. one of the first things I will always ask them is how many people have had an adult tell you, you got to feel good about yourself, don't let what other kids say to you bother you, and you got to just let things roll off your back. You got to be confident and have good self-esteem. 100% of the kids raise their hand. Some adult somewhere has told them you got to be confident and have good self-esteem. And then I always ask them that killer question, which is, how many of you have had an adult show you how to have it? And the hands go down.
Yeah.
And then we open up into an honest conversation about that internal dialogue that's going on in their heads. And usually it sounds something like this: I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough,
Yes.
I didn't do well enough on that test, I should have done this better. And so again, as we look at all of the issues, especially when it comes to drugs and alcohol, we know that how kids feel about themselves and perceive themselves is actually very much connected to this whole story we're going to tell. Kids look to feel like they can belong.
Yes.
And they'll go to any lengths to figure out where that place is.
Because I may not be pretty enough, but after I drink a little bit, I'm really funny.
I'm just part of the crowd. I just want to be part of the crowd, right? And and I feel, wanting to kind of bring this back, because I know we began this conversation about talking about coalitions and how to begin to make change. The bridge that I want to be really clear about is when you have kids who are stressed, filled with anxiety, trying to figure out who they are, trying to figure out where they are in the world, and everything about their environment supports drinking. And that means that they see it everywhere. They see televisions, sporting activities, everywhere you go.
They see parents red cupping it at their football game.
Right, the parents with the little nips in their pocketbook, and and oftentimes parents have plenty of pills on them as well. This is not just about kid behavior. This is about adult behavior. So when you start to put all of those things into play, it all begins to paint a bigger picture. And what has happened is that we've normalized substances in this society.
Yes.
We've made it so that they're just everywhere, they're just around, they're part of the norm. And I often wonder if the alien ship came down and said, but your kids are dying.
Yeah.
We've got to be drastic in what we do. We no longer, this isn't about just saying no. This isn't about just doing one strategy. It's not about having a recovery speaker come in. And I have a lot of phenomenal friends in recovery who will speak in schools, and that's awesome, but that strategy in and of itself does not change behavior on a Friday, Saturday night. And by golly, I hope that as schools begin to tackle this, as people come together to have this conversation, that there are enough educators at the table to say prevention does not mean this one-sided thing.
Correct.
And I got to tell you, and I'm thankful for all the people who are saying K through 12, evidence-based programming. That is a brilliant push. It cannot end there, though.
No, it cannot.
It cannot end there. And we can't look at the schools alone to just fix this. There are 4 main areas of a kid's life: family, school, individual, and community. And change must happen in all 4 of those places. So we've got to do exactly what they're doing in Northport, East Northport, right? On the individual side, how do we teach kids to look at natural highs, look at positive alternatives? How do we teach kids to begin to right-size their emotions and have emotional intelligence?
Coping skills.
And
all of
coping
those
skills.
Things.
And
but
deal
if
with
we
that.
don't change drastically, and those drastic change is just going to translate to 10 years from now, we're not going to be standing in a worse situation than we are today.
That's the
and
part,
that is a scary idea, to be standing in a worse epidemic than we are today. I can't even, I shudder to imagine it. I really do.
One of the dangers, and my guess is pretty much any prevention person, as we watch this thing unfold with the opiates, a lot of us had been warning everybody about this, have been kind of saying, this is coming, this is no joke. And unfortunately, until there was bodies to count, we didn't pay attention to it. Now my concern is we're making our response only about the opiates. And I gotta tell you, it's really about the condition of the pond. That's why the kids are, that's why the fish are dying. Is what's going on in the pond. And so yes, we've made some great strides with opiates, with our laws, with raising awareness, doing some
with treatment, with all of those things.
Right? With all those things. And
no one picks up and injects heroin as their first drug of choice.
Absolutely.
My son started with either a cigarette, alcohol, or marijuana. 100% of heroin users started with one of those three gateway drugs.
Yeah.
Not 99%, not 50%, 100%.
Oh, I know.
So I always say to parents, well, that's great. Out of my 3 kids, I didn't know that the switch would go off just in Thomas.
Yeah.
Why did it go off just in Thomas? So you're 1,000 times, you're 1,000% correct that your kids are not going to go down this path.
Yeah.
I challenge you to say, why not your kid?
Yeah.
Why not your kid?
Yep.
That doesn't happen in this household.
Yeah.
Because that's insanity.
Yeah. So when we take a look at the hereditary factor, we know that definitely plays a role.
Huge.
Then you throw in the environmental components of it, and then in a soil that is just ripe for this stuff to grow. And by golly, Suffolk County, the soil is ripe. Kids have discretionary money.
Yes.
The big house parties, the sweet 16s that are, most people would die to have weddings like the sweet 16s we have here, right?
Yes.
And so, and then you just take our boating, our barbecuing, the way that we socialize. Again, this isn't a young person's problem. This is an adult problem.
This is an everyone problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an everyone problem.
Yeah. So.
And if parents knew that what they do with alcohol, cupping it, putting in tampons, both boys and girls, and I'll leave that to your imagination where each is put.
Yeah.
If they knew that it could lead to infertility, certainly other things in a boy, and blindness in your eye because they pour that right into their mucous membrane of their eye. We're talking about some really sick behavior to get high. So that goes to a whole nother level of why do they need to binge to the point of blacking out?
Right, and that's part of the questions that are really good. Coalition begins to put all these pieces together. But why is this happening? But why here? One of our local East End communities, when we talk about points of access, 4 out of 5, they did an undercover sting to purchase alcohol, where they sent minors in who weren't 21, who literally said, "I'm not 21, can I buy?" 4 out of 5 establishments sold to the minors, even with the knowledge that they were not 21. 4 out of 5. That's only good when you're talking about dentist surveys. It's not good when you're talking about.
That is unbelievable.
So unacceptable.
So if a community came together and all the business owners said, you know what, we're going to bulletproof this 4 square, mile area, and they're not going to be able to buy in our community, what does that say to you young people? Yeah. We value you enough.
Yeah.
Because they're going to bitch, moan, and complain. They absolutely are going to do that. That's an adolescent's job.
Yep.
And deep down inside of them, they're going to go, wow, they love me.
You know how many kids I've talked to who have been, when their parents have punished them, they've almost felt relief, because even though they felt that they wanted to go to that party, they really felt relief that they wound up not being there.
Yeah.
And that's, again, just working with young people, listening with them, getting kids to connect to other kids. When you begin to build those networks of young people who choose to do different things on a Friday or Saturday night than be around drugs and alcohol, to do things in their community and a game night, whatever it is that they want to plan, they need a way to connect to one another. What we find too is that as we begin to take a look at the house parties, some are so involved where they're actually hiring kids to stand outside as bouncers. What we want parents,
and there is a social host law, you will be prosecuted.
Right, yeah. And
never mind the fact that in Melville, that poor young girl was so drunk that she walked away from that house party and was killed. You had parties out east that were 300 kids or six,
Yeah.
some insane number.
Insane.
And the parents were home.
Yeah. So we see a couple things with the house parties, right? Sometimes the parents help in the organization of it. Sometimes they're savvy enough to say, we're going out to dinner and we're not going to be here. Sometimes they're upstairs just sleeping. Sometimes, and I have spoken with parents who legitimately thought the kids were in the basement just hanging out, and kids snuck stuff in, even though now it's still a parent's job, right? So let's talk about that social host law. If you are over the age of 18 and in control of the dwelling, you can be charged with the social host law. So if you come home from college and you're 20 years old and you start to have all of your 19 and 18-year-old friends over and they're all drinking and the cops come, you as the 20-year-old, even though you don't own the house, as long as you're over the age of 18, you're in control of the situation, you can be held accountable. Now what you have to do is when the police officer steps up to the house and says, there's an underage drinking party, you have to be able to turn around and have corrective action, which means you start calling the parents, you start letting them know you need to come get them. You never let a kid leave your house under the influence and send them home. We always make sure they get safe rides home, and you turn them over to your parent. But if you don't do that corrective action, if you're not willing to do anything, you absolutely can get charged $500 the first time. It's a misdemeanor, $1,000 the second time, and or a year in jail. People push against the social host law regularly, saying, well, don't you have bigger things like heroin to fight? But the truth is, when we go to it's where addiction begins, not
Yes.
where it ends, this is so much a part of this puzzle.
Absolutely.
And so much a piece that we need to begin to address. If we don't change community norms,
Yes.
we're not going to change what's happening. And in order to change community norms, we need a strategic prevention framework in which to do it, where we use proven and effective strategies. We bring together the community stakeholders for a continued conversation with actions that will get good results. And it is based on the science of your community and what your community's needs are. So
we're not going to eradicate this disease. We're not. No. But there has to be a huge shift the other way. It should be the minority of our kids that are risk takers. Because there's going to be risk takers always.
The biggest piece that if anybody can take away of, this isn't about right or wrong. It's not about moral. Right. What it is about is keeping those chemicals, those mind-altering chemicals out of kids' brains for as long as we possibly can, especially during that developmental stage. And those brains aren't fully hardwired till the average age of 25. So from a chemical health point of view, we want to keep all substances out of that young developing brain and give it its space to develop. The more that we begin to, because this is simply a disease of the brain. It is not a disease of willpower. It's not a disease of good or bad.
It's not a moral failing. It's not anything.
Failing, right? It is
said no one that they ever wanted to be stricken with this disease.
Yeah. It is simply a disease of the brain. And the same as my diabetic grandmother could not manage sugar in her system. And we never got mad at her for that. We never shamed her for that. We never stigmatized her for that.
Correct.
Her body just couldn't process sugar. The same way mine couldn't process alcohol, or somebody else's can't process marijuana. We have a chemical craving for more, and it has nothing to do with how incredible of human beings we are. We just can't have it in our systems.
It's almost like an allergy.
Yep.
So it's very simply put. Simple, but if we don't start to change, I really do shudder to think, because it's just horrific to see all these people, especially the young people, Alcohol used to take a really long time to kill people.
Opiates aren't.
Yeah, opiates aren't. And binge drinking is not. So, if you think you're getting them prepared for college by allowing them to drink earlier, let's rethink that point of view.
There's enough science that kind of teaches us that that's, as well-intentioned as we feel that might be, there's enough science working on our side and for us to know that we could do better.
Yeah,
definitely do better.
We know better. We have to do better. It's imperative on our, on our generation. to really do better.
Absolutely. And I do think you see now your kindergartner, your elementary and your middle school parents paying attention with a different set of eyes right now.
I'm going to agree with you. And our good friend there, Tim Sinney, said his, what is he, mid-30s with little ones? He said he believes that his generation is handling things just a little bit differently with their little ones. Yeah.
Good stuff.
We can only pray, really, at this point.
Keep singing the song.
Can keep speaking it, but my final words will be, why not your kid? Thank you for joining us this evening. And guess what? Kym's going to be back next week. And we're going to continue this conversation because it is very important for our communities to really start to step up to the plate. Have a great weekend. Have a great night.